Weinhold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, the top 20 characteristics of an authentic parent. We have discussed the topic of authentic self, living your most authentic life, finding authenticity on the podcast at length, many times in many episodes. In fact, today's guest has appeared on the podcast before. He has written a new book called Get Real: The Hazards of Living Out of Your False Self. Are you living your life out of your authentic self or false self? According to my guest, your false self shows up in two very different ways: the deflated or depressed false self and the inflated or narcissistic false self. The hazards you face by living out of your false self in either case include victim behaviors, depression, anxiety, addiction, narcissistic behaviors, toxic shame, projections, and poor decisions that likely involve trying to please others rather than being true to yourself. My guest today is Dr. Barry Weinhold. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Colorado, a licensed psychologist since 1976, and an author and co-author of over 70 books. He serves as the clinical director of the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership. He co-directs the Colorado Professional Development Center, where he offers trauma-informed care trainings to health service professionals. As I said, he was a guest on the show once before. His episode is titled How to Break Free of the Drama Triangle and Victim Consciousness, and it's number 220. I really enjoyed reconnecting with Dr. Weinhold, and I really enjoy the list of the top 20 characteristics of an authentic parent that he put together. If you're interested in having the list in a PDF form, I will have it available in the show notes for you. There are several other episodes that complement today's conversation very well. I will have links to those in the show notes as well. And now, please enjoy this important conversation with Barry Weinhold. Dr. Weinhold, I am so delighted and pleased to welcome you back to the podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be back and good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. You have a new book, and it sounds like you've been pretty productive during the pandemic. In fact, you've written 2 books, correct?
3 books.
3 books. Tell us about the other books, about all of the books that you've written in 2020.
Well, I had a 4-book series for men called my Real Men series. And I had a book on what I called male mothering, helping men access their nurturing side as a parent. And then another book called The Servant Leader. And the subtitle is What the World Needs Now. Our leadership models aren't very good. And then a third book to deal with our aging population called The Wise Elder. And then my 4th book, which I finished this year, is called The Open-Hearted Lover.
So you have a variety of, like you're talking about the lifespan from...
Well, I am. And I'm really talking about how to help men develop their feminine side. Because in our culture, that's not done. And it's not very attractive to do. But I think it's like having men with one arm tied behind their back. They can't do the full job they need to do in all areas of their life without having some access to their nurturing side, their intuitive side, their empathic side. And that's all what we call feminine qualities. So that's what the books are about, is to help balance men with their masculine and feminine. Actually, both men and women, according to Carl Jung, have masculine and feminine qualities. And so it's good for both men and women to have those balanced.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the second book was called Take the Red Pill. Remember
Yes.
the Matrix series?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's all about how to sort out the fake news from the real news, and what is real and what is fake. So I thought it was very timely because we had so much the controversy about what the news was, what was real and what wasn't. And then the third book, of course, is the Get Real book, which subtitled as The Hazards of Living Out of Your False Self.
Yeah, which I'm holding in my hand, and we're going to talk about it today in this conversation.
If I can just add, I'm also almost finished with another book, which maybe I'll come back and talk about some other time. And it's called Intimate Combat. And the subtitle is Conflict Resolution Skills for Couples.
Oh, I'm interested in that. I think every couple, every parent can use those conflict resolution skills.
Yeah,
right?
And it's almost like a workbook. It has a lot of very hands-on worksheets that you can step-by-step take you through how to resolve all kinds of conflicts. So I'll have that done in about another month.
Very good, very good. I like your books because they have practical elements to them.
Yes,
you have lots of quizzes, self-inquiries, you have tips and tools. So I like that about your writing. So I would love to begin by asking you, what's the value and significance of making sense of our early childhood stories? I mean, shouldn't we leave the past in the past and just forget and move on, or there is value in it?
Everybody would like to just forget about the past and move on. I mean, that's a kind of a natural instinct that people have. But here's the problem with that, is the research shows that the natural learning style of human beings is to repeat things over and over that didn't get settled in early childhood. So you can't escape the past. It keeps coming back and haunting you if you try to. And good luck if you can kind of move on and forget about it, because you do it at your own peril. But I think normalizing it and saying it's just your natural learning style, and you can expect that anything that happened or didn't happen in your past that disrupted your development in some way will show up again later in life to get finished. And the trick then is to be able to connect the dots and say, oh, this is what I'm experiencing now. This problem I'm having had some roots in my childhood. Let me try to figure out what's missing, what didn't get finished there, and that's starting to show up here. And then I can finish it here. So that's how I work with people, is I don't let them kind of avoid their childhood. And I give them tools then to do what I call personal archaeology, where they have to go back and look at what is it that happened to them or didn't happen to them that caused some disruption in their development. And everybody had some kind. I mean, there's no such thing as someone having a perfect childhood. I mean, and so the more you know about that, the more you can self-parent. And when an issue comes up and it kind of, you notice from your reaction it's greater than what it should be, that's a good sign that this is something from your past that didn't get finished then and is showing up this time to get finished.
I personally don't like the word reparenting or self-parenting. For some reason, I have a resistance to that word. When I hear people talk about this a lot lately, right? I see on social media, reparent yourself. And I personally, it gives me like, oh, I don't want to reparent myself. I'm an adult. I need a better term for that, because reparenting means, first of all, it means that parenting wasn't done quote unquote correctly or adequately. I get that. Yeah, none of us had perfect childhoods. I think
there's no such thing as a perfect parent.
even if there was, that in and of itself will be another type of problem, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but the word reparenting for me is a little off-putting personally. It's a turnoff. I wonder what you can say about that, or what words can I use perhaps that are better? What are some
Well,
synonyms that you use?
what I tell my clients is that the two skills you need to learn to do this work is you need to be able to self-reflect first and think about yourself and your past and how it's affecting your present. And then the second thing you need to do is self-correct. So that's what I'm talking about parenting yourself. It's self-correction, which maybe is a better term.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because for me, like reparenting, it puts me again in a weaker, lower position, like as if I'm still a child or an undeveloped. And I may be, right? Because
There may be
I'm
parts of us that are not fully developed, but I think you're right. I mean, that's not the best term. I like the self-reflect, self-correct terms.
Yeah, yeah. So where does one begin? And how long do you think we should dig into our past? Because for me, I feel like a lot of people get stuck also in some kind of pattern of digging their past and trying to untangle their patterns. And they become sort of hooked on that and intellectualize and stay in that gives them the kind of comfort as if they are solving and resolving the same puzzle over and over again. But what I also want for people is to just learn, self-reflect, correct, and move forward with life, because
Yeah,
life is
right.
moving forward.
Right. Well, I tell I have kind of a story, or a humorous story to tell about that. I say there's a mythical place somewhere called central casting,
Mm-hmm.
and they have an unlimited supply of actors and actresses to send into your life to help you learn your lessons. And they will keep sending them until you learn your lessons. So if you had a parent that was hard to deal with, you're going to find a boss that's pretty similar to that parent, or maybe even a spouse that's similar to that parent. And so as long as you haven't finished whatever needed to be finished, central casting is just going to keep sending these people into your life to help you learn your lessons. And I say there's only two conditions in life that you can count on. One of them is you're either in bliss or you have lessons to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I put it as it's just a lifelong journey of learning one's lessons and improving one's life and the quality of life. I mean, I think that I'm talking about quality of life here. I'm getting ready to start my own podcast called Finding Hope, and the subtitle is The End to Suffering. And it comes out of a Buddhist precept, which says that pain is inevitable in life, but suffering is optional. And so I'm going to have guests on that I interview, and they will tell their story about how they overcame their suffering and how they ended it. And so I think that that's our task, is that as adults, is to look at whatever is still unfinished from earlier in our life and do what we can to finish it. And when people do that, they find the quality of their life improves. So it's self-reinforcing.
Yeah. So you talk about in your new book about the notion of false self and true self.
I also talk about the authentic self.
Yes, which I really like because it resonates with my work. Can you tell us how the false self forms? And then I'll ask you some questions about how to find our true self.
I have some ideas about that too. I'll be glad to share. The process, we're developmental psychologists. And so we created a 4-stage model of development. And the self moves through those 4 stages. And so the first stage is from 0, whatever you decide is 0, to about 9 months. And that's what is called the codependent stage of development. And the main task in that stage is bonding and attachment. Now, humans cannot survive without bonding and attachment to another human. That's been proven. So it's a vital, life-saving skill to have parents or other adult caregivers that you can bond and attach to. Now, what we find is that about half of the people from the research, about half of the infants that leave that first 9-month stage aren't fully bonded and attached. They have partial or in what is sometimes called insecure bonding and attachment. They don't have a secure attachment. And that leads them to not develop what Erik Erikson called the first stage and main task that he talked about was the development of basic trust. And so they go through their life then doubting them, maybe themselves and other people, and not trusting, maybe even not even trusting the government. I think some of that comes out of a lack of this bonding and attachment in that first stage. And so then they move on when they can walk and crawl and walk and move away from their bonded caregivers. They start exploring their environment. And this is what we call the counterdependent stage, which the main task is emotional separation. So they become emotionally separated and start to develop a self of their own, because in the first stage, they don't have a self of their own. It's all entwined with the other people in their lives at that point. But by the time they start about 12, 18 months, they start to develop a separate self from their parents. And they can see this, they can understand this. I'm now separate from them. And so the completion of this stage, if parents know how to facilitate this, is the development of the authentic self. The foundation for the authentic self happens about age 3. And it's sometimes called individuation, or Margaret Mahler called it the psychological birth of the self. Is that there's a physical development that happens at birth, but then the psychological development lags behind until there's enough separation and enough individual self there to work with. And also cognitively, they have now the cognitive awarenesses that they need to have that full individuated authentic self. And then instead of if that doesn't happen, instead of the authentic self developing, develop a false self. And the false self is a substitute for not completing that. My estimates, I said about half of the infants leave the first stage without complete attachment. I would say 95% of people leave the second stage without having fully completed that process of developing that authentic self at age 3. So they're constantly catching up on that one. And that's why the false self becomes so important, because it's the only game in town for people who don't have an authentic self. And so the first task is to realize that you have something other than this false self and know the difference. In the book, I talk a little bit about how to do that. But I think and what I found is that in working with people, the easiest way to start, I mean, everyone wants to know what's it look like to have an authentic self. And I say, well, let's talk about what is in the way of that first. And that's where we start. And then we look at what kinds of things are not finished from that second stage of development that are still showing up in their life. And when we can get some sense of that, then we can start talking about the alternative to that and the authentic self. And so the other 2 stages of our 4-stage model then is the independent stage, where you have a totally independent self. And if you complete successfully the first 2 stages, then that happens almost naturally. And during that independent stage, your main task is mastery over your environment, your immediate environment, learning to do things on your own. And you know, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, how excited they are when they get to do things on their own, and they learn new things, and they're very quickly want to share that with their parents and share the joy of discovery. And then by about the age of, that goes from about, we say from about 3 to about age 6. that second stage, the third stage. And the fourth stage starts about when people go to school. And then it should end at when they leave school. And that task is really, I call it the interdependent stage. They learn how to cooperate with others. And they learn how to get along in the world. And they learn how to resolve conflicts and get their needs met. And if they did those things successfully at 17 or 18, they would have all they would need to live the rest of their life out of that stage and be able to form interdependent relationships with their partners, have children, and be able to parent them from that interdependent stage of knowing who they are and knowing that who their children are and how to facilitate what they just learned. But if they didn't do that, it gets very hard to be a parent and try to help a child to do the same thing that you didn't get.
So
one more thing.
Yeah.
That there's two kinds of false selves that I think is important to know. There's what we call the deflated false self. And that's usually shows up as people who are depressed in their energy. They just can't seem to quite get things done. And they're basically of low energy and low initiative. And the second kind of false self, which is actually more common in this country than the first, is the inflated false self, the narcissistic false self, which is, again, a defense against not having enough inner resources. So one has to then act like one does and be narcissistic and maybe even embellish one's credentials or standing to help people like them. And that's where the false self really operates a lot, because basically the false self is the self we use to try to impress other people with who we are and how to get them to like us and have some affiliation. Because again, that first stage of not having completed that attachment and bonding, they're still looking for that in their adult relationships or in their adult connections with organizations and causes and movements, whatever. It is really an ongoing process of people living out of that. But in a way, it's almost like living on a treadmill. They don't really get to where they feel happy.
Where does unworthiness, shame fall into place in the formation of the false self?
Well, children have often cognitively, they cannot separate, and this really I mentioned in that first stage of development, they can't separate who they are from who their parents are. And so if anything bad happens to them, they think they caused it. They think there must be something wrong with them. And that persists then if they don't ever get that changed. And basically, that's what shame's about. It's something's wrong with me. And so, I mean, every client I've ever worked with has this issue. And it comes out with what I call their personal law, which is the bottom line, most negative thought you have about yourself when something bad happens. And usually it's some very deep self-criticism. And it's often something that amounts to, I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not whatever enough. And that's a basic means there's basically something wrong with me that I'm not enough. And that's what shame's about.
Yeah, I like how you said the lowest statement. How did you say about yourself?
The most negative statement.
The most negative statement. I think this is a good point to sort of underscore for someone who is listening, to pause and reflect and say, what is the most negative statement that I use to describe myself or how I feel or my inner critic?
Yeah, when you screw up on something,
Yeah, because everybody has their own script, right? Of course, there are like common ones that all of us share.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good starting point in terms of self-reflection to write down that negative statement and just to examine it, because sometimes it's so painful you don't even want to face it.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, but often then I help people look at, where did that come from? I mean, we weren't born with it. So where did you learn that? And then to be able to see. Sometimes then I take people through, I have a 5-step process for helping people change their core shame beliefs.
Yeah, in your book, you have a quiz, right? There's a
Yeah,
self-quiz to identify those negative
yeah, I
statements.
have all the steps in there. That's right. It's in the latter part of the book. That process I use with my clients to help them process through their shame to get to a better place about better self esteem and better thoughts about themselves.
Yeah, because it's worthwhile. I mean, what are the costs of living from your false self? How limiting your life, one's life is? What are
Yeah,
the consequences?
absolutely. I think it's a tragedy. And also, we're now looking at, that's in the book as well, is the overall effect of a population living out of its false self. It can bring down a democracy. I mean, literally, a democracy depends on people having independent thinking. Well, people who operate out of their false self don't have independent thinking. They're still stuck back in the counterdependent stage and usually what they're stuck with is in any kind of decision or any kind of thoughts about decisions, they can only usually come up with two options. It's either this or that. So what we call either or thinking or splitting is one of the stages, the substages of the counterdependent stage of development. It's one of the latter ones, and that's where people often get stuck. And so when mother is available to meet their needs, mother is a good mother. But if mother's busy on the phone or distracted or something, she becomes a bad mother. So it's a split. But also by that time, they're not totally separate from their mother. And so if mother's bad mother, then I'm bad child as well, because I'm part of mother yet. And so that's where I think a lot of the shame starts as well, is that they basically label what they do as bad or what other people do as bad. And so it's all based, again, on how they get their needs met.
I'm interrupting this conversation to ask you to take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts if you're listening on an Apple device. It's very easy to do, and you can do it with me as I guide you through the steps. Minimize your current screen, go to your podcast app, click on the shows, tap on the Authentic Parenting cover art, then scroll down until you see ratings and reviews. If you only want to rate, simply tap on the number of stars you want to give to the show, and I hope it's 5. Then you'll get a message on your screen that says submitted. Thanks for your feedback. If you're feeling more generous, then you can write a couple of sentences and share why you love this podcast. In that case, click on the write a review. Once you are done, click send. That's it. You only need to do this once, and your overall rating and review goes to the entire show, not just a particular episode. I can't wait to receive new ratings and reviews. Thank you so much. And now, please continue listening to this wonderful conversation. How can someone know if they are living their life from their false self? What are some characteristics or things or tendencies that one does when they live?
I'll tell you a very tragic story then.
Mm-hmm.
I have a client, I saw him first about 2 years ago, and he read my book called The Flight from Intimacy, where at that time was the first time I introduced the idea of the false self. It's about counterdependency, basically. And he said, "You described me to a T in your book. I want to work with you." And he lived out of his false self, and he identified that because he said, "Everything I do doesn't make me happy." And he was a multimillionaire, a very successful businessman. but a terrible marriage, which ended in divorce. He was alienated from his kids. He was totally unhappy, even though on the surface he looked like he would be a pretty successful guy, and he was, but he just couldn't quite reach the point of understanding. But the book helped him, and then so we worked with him, and he turned the corner this summer, and was now very much into happy and developing his authentic self. He was having fun. He had a new girlfriend, and he had a house in Hawaii, and they were out there playing, and they were paddleboarding on Saturday morning, and they were out a ways, and the wind shifted, and it took him a lot of energy to get back to shore. And he complained that he had some chest pains afterwards, and he thought maybe he pulled a muscle or something. Well, an hour later, he dropped over dead. And he was in my men's group, and so we've been mourning his loss since Saturday. But a tragic case of a man who, and he was 60 years old when he died, but he just 2 years ago discovered that he had a false self. He had not even known that until 2 years ago. So he worked very hard on it, but maybe it was too late for him.
Well, we don't want our listeners and people to wait till it's too late to discover their authentic
my
self.
message. That's my exact message. Thank you. And what people ask me though, how long is it going to take me to work on this until I feel like I'm through it? Imagine you've heard that.
Yes, and I know.
What I tell people is, if you're working on it consistently, it takes about 1 month for every year you've been alive. That's a general kind of ballpark. And then obviously, I think once you've turned the corner on it and are starting to go on the downward slope of success, it then becomes a lot easier and much more natural. And so I think it's probably a lifelong project, but it isn't the labor of that first time of first discovering what it is that's wrong with you and why you're having these problems. And once you discover that, then the rest it comes along with just living a better and more fulfilling life.
So where does one begin then the process of discovering their authentic self?
It can begin a lot of ways, but I think, as I suggested earlier, that first of all, looking at what's in the way. What is showing up in your life that's preventing you? And as I mentioned what the false self was, how I define the authentic self is the self that speaks from your heart. And maybe the false self speaks more from the mind and from the defenses we've created about feeling shame. So when people first start to do that and they can speak authentically from their own heart, that's the first steps of regaining that authentic self. And actually the whole process, as I outlined earlier, of having a false self could happen by the age of 3. I mean, have an authentic self, but it could happen by age of 3 if parents knew what to do. So it really requires parents to be authentic. And so last night I sat down and made a list of 20 characteristics of an authentic parent. And I'd be glad to share that with your audience.
Let's do it. You are speaking my language. Yes, let's do it.
Well, the first one is, I put it as, show up and tell your truth. And walk your talk and be radically present in everything you do in your life, and speak your truth and allow yourself to be vulnerable and transparent. Don't keep any hidden agendas. And really, the only thing you owe your children is your truth. And the second one, make your children your top priority in everything you do or say. Don't let anything interfere with this commitment. This is your most important job on the planet, to show up and be as effective as a parent as you can with your kids. Third, listen to your children with an open heart. Listen to them with an open heart and be present to receive them and whatever they're telling you. And then fourth, trust your gut and follow your destiny. I think listen to and trust the voice inside of you. And this is what authenticity allows you to do, to have that inner voice and that inner knowing that helps guide you. 5, live and love fearlessly and unconditionally. And this means loving yourself and others, especially your children, unconditionally. And actually, most parents are conditional with their love. I'll love you if you behave the way I think you should. And that's really not love. That's conditioning and manipulation. But we call it love. The only way you can really love your children is unconditionally. I told my son one day, I said, there's nothing you can do to prevent me from loving you. Absolutely nothing. I will always love you regardless of what you do. That's what unconditional love is about. And then number 6, as best you can, stay centered. And that means recognizing when something that maybe your kids say that kind of upsets you and pulls you off center. And before engaging them, try to bring yourself back to center. Calm yourself. Take a couple deep breaths and relax. And then talk to them. But don't try to talk to them when you're not centered. Number 7, cooperate with others to get all your needs met. And this is a powerful model for your children. To have your parents being able and to not play victim and to really are effective at getting their own needs met. And then number 8 is what we talked about earlier, connect the dots. Whatever happened to you in your past that's showing up now. And parenting will bring it up. Bring up anything in your childhood that didn't get settled. And it'll show up as in your kids and your reaction to them. I mean, the old story is that you say, I will never, ever, ever say and do the things that my parents did to me when I have kids. And then in the heat of battle, you find yourself saying almost the exact words that were said to you, which is humbling, of course. Let's see, where are we? Number 9, live a more self-directed life. And this means taking charge of your life without guilt or shame. And this is, again, a powerful model to give your kids how to do that. Mastering being independent. And also, at the same time, sustaining intimacy with friends and family. And then number 10 is how to know how to regulate your emotions. So if you get upset, learn to calm yourself down. It's a little bit like being uncentered and centered. And so, again, regain your composure before you try to, if you have a conflict with your kids, before you engage them in that conflict. And number 11, know where you end and others begin. Boundaries. Be able to establish and maintain your own clear sense of your boundaries in your close relationships, especially with your children. Knowing what's theirs and what's yours. It's an enormously important quality to have as an authentic parent. And then number 12, engage in radical self-care. Taking good care of yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, makes you a model again for your children, that they then see how you do it and they can then pick that up and do it for themselves. Number 13, keep all your agreements. Keeping agreements with others is a high priority as a parent. If you have to change an agreement, go back to your kids and explain what happened that causes you to, with some pain, to change an agreement you had with them and renegotiate a new agreement with them. Do it directly. Don't just blow it off, because that's very painful to children when you make an agreement like, we're going to go to the beach this weekend. And then something happens that prevents that from happening, and you don't go back and process it with them. What were they feeling? I'm sure they were disappointed. They need to be able to express that, and then expressing your regret too, that you wanted to go to the beach as well, and tell them why you had to change, and then renegotiate. Well, we can't go this weekend, but we'll definitely go next weekend. That's the kind of way you need to deal with your kids and keeping agreements and resolve all conflicts directly with them. Most parents don't have good conflict resolution skills.
I think most humans, I think most of us were never taught, right?
No.
That's why I think communication and conflict resolution skills should be part of every school curriculum.
It should be one of the R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and conflict resolution.
Yes.
And it isn't, unfortunately. And so people have to learn it on the fly. And that's why my new book, I think, is going to be very important for that purpose. It's really important to learn how to do that with your kids and resolve conflicts effectively with them. Also, be patient. Number 15, be patient with yourself and others. Maintain good feelings about yourself, even when you screw up.
That's a tough one.
Forgive yourself.
Yes, that's a tough one, especially if you're struggling with, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve goodness, low self-esteem, and unworthiness. It's like in those parenting moments, you don't feel good.
No, you don't. Well, accept your vulnerability. I tell my clients, I said, human beings are allowed 20% mistakes. And if you can't accept the fact that you make 20% mistakes, you're just going to have to turn in your belly button. So anyway, where are we? Number 16. Take responsibility for everything you say and do. That's a big one.
That's a big one. You're speaking my language. That's my biggest thing, responsibility. Take personal responsibility. I've been preaching this lately. It's, yes.
Well, that's a characteristic of an authentic parent and an authentic adult, actually. All of us should live that way. And I have a way of expressing that, meaning owning what's yours and give back to others what's not yours. Because sometimes we take on things that other people we thought would be good for us and they turned out not to be. And we realize that, give it back wherever it came from. And let's see, number 17, feel and express all your emotions. A parent who can be authentic on their feeling and emotional side is extremely important in working with your children and giving them a sense of that's being authentic, to share your feelings and when you're relating to your children, even your deepest feelings. And that model is going to carry them for the rest of their life, because many children grow up feeling that it's not okay to feel certain feelings like anger or even sadness sometimes.
Or in fact, they saw only anger, lashing out type of behaviors in their homes, and they think all emotions equals lashing out, right? I think a good distinction here, of course, I understand what you mean, but I want to, emphasize that constructive, healthy, effective ways of expressing emotion, not like,
oh yes,
I throw the chair at you or slam the door and scream profanities. Someone may say I'm expressing myself, but that's not what we mean.
I added the word inappropriate ways here.
Yes. I just want to highlight that, because many people, I'm sorry to interject, but many people these days are like, I'm authentic. Screw you. You're this, you're that. They go
that's
like,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not being authentic.
That's not being authentic. Or as Brené Brown, I'm not sure if you've seen Brené.
Yeah, I know Brené Brown's work quite well.
She has a Netflix special. In her Netflix special, there was one line that stayed with me. She says, if you're live broadcasting your bikini waxing process, that's not authenticity. That's not vulnerability.
Yeah, I saw that Netflix. I didn't remember that one, but a number of lines in there I thought were priceless.
Yeah.
Okay, number 18 is commit to taking back your projections.
Ooh. Tell more about this. This is good.
So when you learn signs that indicate that you're projecting something about yourself on your children, reclaim it as yours.
This is a toughie.
Yep, it is. I mean, basically, we have to re-own our shadow parts of ourselves that we've been hiding actually from ourselves by projecting them sometimes on our own children.
I think hence taking personal responsibility. I think this personal responsibility should be like at the top of the list, because if you don't take the personal responsibility, then you're not going to look at your shadow self, right?
No, you're not. I mean, it's part of personal responsibility. I agree.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Number 18, give your children twice as many yeses as nos.
Oh, so good. Yes.
Children, before they reach the tender age of 2, hear the word no over 200,000 times, according to research.
Oh, God.
It means they needed to have you say yes 400,000 times, twice as many yeses as nos. But that goes beyond just age 2. I mean, anytime you're dealing with people, your children, I mean, there's lots of ways you can do that. I mean, it's like, for example, if your toddler is throwing his blocks because he's frustrated or mad about something, you can say the following things to him. I see that you're mad about something, and it's not okay to throw blocks when you're mad. Instead, if you're mad about something, you can come and talk to me about your feelings.
Yeah.
And then we can work out another way for you to express your mad feelings. See, you don't put down the mad feelings. You just give them options, other ways that they can do that more appropriately.
I agree with you here. I have done several podcast episodes on how to say no without actually saying it. Yeah. That's a title of an episode I have done. I've written a booklet, 15 Keys to Effective Communication. In there, I have a tool, a tip, say it positively or neutrally. The statement, the don't, the stop, don't do it, you can't do it. How can you switch that and use a more positive or neutral language? Instead of saying, don't throw it, don't throw your food on the floor, food stays on your plate. It's the same thing, but a much better. It's not a no, right? Instead of, no, you can't do that. No, you can't have that. Yes, you can have that tomorrow. Yes, you can have after you complete this. It's an attitude you need to develop. And I've been working hard in my parenting too. Or when I get an email or an invitation or a favor or some kind of thing in my email, instead of saying, no, I can't do that, I don't, I always use a more neutral language instead of the stingy no, putting barrier between me and the person.
I have a way of also talking to parents about that. And I say, if you have to say no, and sometimes to be protective, you do. You follow that by, no, you can't do this, but here are 2 other things you can do that are safe. Yeah. And so, and that doesn't take a lot of thinking to come up with. Parents can do that. And then also this last one, which I think is a really important one, respond to their excitement with joy and empathy.
Yeah, I really love that one. Yeah.
If your toddler comes to you and they're excited about showing you something they just discovered, don't say something like, well, thanks for sharing that with me. Or even worse, can't you see I'm busy? Go do something else.
Or even my 12-year-old, all she wants to talk about is this game, Minecraft, which I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, anytime, the children, as they discover new things and they're excited about it, the way to respond is to respond to their feelings like, I can see how excited you are with what you just discovered. It must feel great to be able to do that. That's the kind of response that builds an authentic self in a child.
Yeah, you're not squashing them. You're not rejecting them constantly, putting them down. Yeah, I agree with that. Even as adults, if your partner, your significant other wants to share something with you, when you have zero interest in it, be open, be present, just listen, be curious, or just say, tell me more. That's interesting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Engage them.
Yeah.
And then also it's very inappropriate to ridicule a child's needs. Sometimes parents do that inadvertently because they don't understand children's needs well enough. You have to respect your children's need. And if you do that, they're likely going to respect your needs.
And then they're going to develop that sense that my needs matter. And when they're older, when they're adults, they will take care of themselves.
Right.
Right.
Well, I have others, but those were my top 20.
I love your list. I wrote down a few of the things.
I'll be glad to send you a copy of them, and you can opposed to
Yes, please. It resonates with me. It's very aligned with what we cover on the podcast. We recently had an excellent episode about needs, boundaries. We talk about this stuff all the time because to me also, the authentic self is what you describe. Is those parts constitute the authentic self. Listen with an open heart, radical self-care, taking personal responsibility, all of those aspects I talk about, I write about, and we do a lot of podcast episodes.
That's what I would define as an authentic parent or an authentic person, but also as an authentic parent.
Yeah.
And that really is the main job of parents. If we could just, and it isn't rocket science, but what we found is that in that crucial separation stage, there comes a stage, the splitting stage, to help the child through that into complete the stage and develop the foundation for the authentic self. It requires two bonded caregivers. Now, often there's not a parent, there are not two parents present. So it may be a grandparent or an uncle or a family friend or somebody, it doesn't matter. But as long as they're bonded to that child. And what happens if the child, say, mother, after being 24/7 for so long, decides that she wants to go out with the girls and have a night out on her own, and dad's home babysitting. And Jimmy is saying, Mommy's not here. She's bad. I don't like her. She went away from me. Dad can't say, yes, I agree with you. She's bad. She should be here. That's the worst thing he can say. And some fathers who are jealous because they didn't get their needs met as much as because mother's so busy with taking care of Jimmy's needs often have that feeling, and they pass it on to their children. I've heard parents say that. But the thing is to really say is, yes, I see how angry and frustrated you are and you miss mommy a lot right now. And that's fine. But while she's gone, I'm here to play with you. Let's figure out something to do together. That's the kind of expression, that's the kind of way that the child gets away from this either or, good and bad. And the resolution of this is that the child begins to see that their parents are human beings, and they have some things that they like about them and the things that they don't like about them, but they're still okay. They still feel okay about their parent. And when they feel okay about their parent, they also feel okay about themselves. And that's the resolution at the end of this splitting stage that leads to an emotional separation. Because basically, if you try to make, and what happens if people don't do that, they often end up making their parent bad. I mean, you hear the terrible twos. That's what that's about, usually. Or the other one that said that the toddler says, I'll show you I can do it myself. The defiance toddler, who almost then starts to reject any help from any adult because they want to prove that this parent of mine is not worth their salt as a parent. So they fire their parent in many ways at age 2. And that's premature separation. I mean, and they're not ready to do that. They're not capable of taking care of themselves fully yet. But the resolution of it, the healthy resolution, is two bonded caregivers, one that helps reflect this difference. Oh, and the other part of that is when mom's gone and dad's babysitting, dad says to the child, when mommy comes back, we'll talk to mommy about how you felt. So there are no secrets. We'll tell her that you were upset that she was gone. And you'll get a chance to talk to her about your feelings.
And the child, as a result, feels seen and heard.
Absolutely,
and his inner experience is validated from externally by the parent. And that's one of the crucial parts of raising an authentic child, not squashing or hindering that process, right? Making your child be seen and heard for who they are, and all of their emotional experiences, to hold that space safely so that they can understand themselves from this early age.
Yeah.
That there's nothing wrong with me, right?
I want to stand up for parents, though, too, and say this country does the poorest job of any developed country of supporting parents. We
True.
don't have family policies. They don't have family leave policies. Almost all the other developed countries have almost often have a year or maybe even longer. We lived in Slovakia, which was part of Czechoslovakia. And the government there provides 3 years of paid maternity leave. 3 years. So mother can stay home with their newborn and their job is protected and they get a salary. And that means that they have full-time responsibility in taking care of that child without having to worry about having to make money and go back to work. In this country, most mothers go back to work at 6 weeks or 8 weeks and put the child in childcare. That's too early. That's much too early.
And they feel bad, but they have no choice.
They have no choice, right?
They have no
Their hands are
choice.
tied, and it's either starve to death or put my child in childcare. And often then it's a financial burden to do that because childcare is not cheap. And then the
Childcare
other
is not cheap. Also, housing is very expensive in the
right.
United States. A normal two working parents, I'm not even speaking about single parents. Let's say two working parents have a hard time. They have so much debt. They have so
Right.
many payments. How can they enjoy their life? Housing costs so much that it's such a big burden for people.
Right.
Even with two incomes, people cannot fully pay for their mortgage, and enjoy their life, a vacation. It's just like people cannot do it. There's something wrong with our system here.
Well, and there's another kind of support that's missing. And every industrial country, every developed country, except the United States and South Africa, have free universal home visitation services available to new parents. They assign, often it's a nurse or somebody who knows about parenting and have been trained to visit the home and offer help. Sometimes it's information about resources that are available to the family they didn't know about, or maybe it's even offering some respite care. Just babysit for 2 hours or something while mom takes a nap, or whatever the family needs at that point. And then usually that home visitor stays with that family for at least 3 years. And they found that in families where they did that, there was absolutely no child abuse or neglect during that time. They did a comparison study. They randomly assigned families to one group where they got home visitation services. The other group didn't. And this was a high-risk group. And they found in the group that had home visitation services, there was no child abuse and neglect. And in the other group, there was rampant child abuse and neglect. And so I myself, as a personal story, I was the firstborn in my family, and my mother had postpartum psychosis. She just couldn't take care of me. Actually, she accidentally almost drowned me in the tub when I was 6 weeks old. When I was born, I weighed 6 pounds, and when I was 8 weeks old, I weighed 5 pounds. So I was what would now be called a failure to thrive baby. And my dad was aware of all this and didn't know what to do. So what he did, which saved my life, is he had me go and live with my grandparents. And so during the week, I stayed with my grandparents. And then on the weekend, when my parents were not working, they could come and get me. But even then, he kept close watch on her. But that helped me see the need for that. And so I helped create a home visitation program here in Colorado called the First Visitor Program. And it's still in effect right now. And any mother who's in the hospital giving birth gets information on the First Visitor Program. And if they want, they can have a home visitor assigned to them. But again, it should be universal and should be absolutely a part of any new parent's protocol to get as much help as they can, because I don't know of any parent who knows how to prepare to be a parent when you're 24/7 and parenting. It is an enormous task, and without any help, and most parents now live distant from their their parents or other relatives. So they don't have resources to have somebody come and take care or help them take care of this newborn. And so the first visitor program has had tremendous success. And I feel that's probably I feel most proud of that as a contribution that I've been able to give to new parents in this area. And it's now a statewide initiative.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds amazing. I remember, looking back at my parenting life, the first 6 months where the toughest. That's when you need help and support as a new parent. You need food, you need comfort, you need emotional support, you need physical support. It's tough. And I agree with everything with what you're saying. And we can prevent so many things, neglect, abuse, by just having services like this available for parents, Well,
our Colorado voters just approved a paid family leave policy of 12 weeks, which is not enough, but it's a start.
Colorado has been progressive in many ways, right?
Yeah, they have been, thank goodness,
Yes. I'm wondering, do you think it would be fair enough to ask you to share briefly, at least, about the how to heal from your shame process, the 5-step process? Can you briefly describe at least the process?
Yeah. First of all, it's to be able to identify what are your core shame-based beliefs, and then to begin to first of all, that second step is to see how strong they are, how important they are in directing your life, because our beliefs direct our behavior. I mean, everything we do and say comes out of some belief system we have, or some old beliefs. And what I found was that most people don't even understand the connection between what they're doing and saying and their earlier beliefs. So that's the first step, is to try to connect the dots with what kind of belief system do I have? What kind of beliefs do I have that probably are not good for me? And then to know how strong they are. And then to begin to, I have a process of helping people change those beliefs through affirmations. And I don't know if you know what affirmations are. Do you?
I do. And you write about in your book that it's not just saying those positive things to yourself. Right. I actually like your process. I have a note here. I wanted to ask more about that. Can you explain this a little more?
Yeah, like an affirmation is a high quality positive thought. And usually it doesn't have any qualifying in it. It's a very definitive. And then you write that down on a piece of paper, and you divide your paper in half. You have one half, draw a line down the middle, and one half you write the affirmation, and then you wait to hear what negative reactions you have to that. Oh, that's stupid. I can't do that. So you write down that. And then you try to take what you wrote down as a reaction and turn that one into a positive belief. I'm not stupid. I can figure this out. And you keep doing that with each belief that you've identified as your core beliefs until you don't have any negative thoughts coming up. And so it can take hours and days to do that, but it's important work. And you just have to process through whatever reactions you have until you finally write one of those affirmations and no negative reactions come up. You can't think of anything negative to say about it. Then you know you've changed that belief. And then it's a matter of reinforcing that change. And I say, write that belief on the bathroom mirror, and put it on the kitchen refrigerator, and anywhere where you are in your office, and say that belief out loud to yourself at least for 30 days. And that's the main thing. And then the last stage is sort of looking at, okay, now that I've changed this belief, how does that make my life better? And start thinking about that, maybe even writing down things that you now think you could do that you never before thought you could do.
Yeah,
So
taking small steps, like
yeah,
courageous act of
yeah,
risks, little risks,
uh,
increases your ability, right, to
absolutely, yeah.
get more comfortable with that.
Mhm. Yeah, and so it's again a self study, a self reflection and self correction process. You don't need to be in therapy to do it. You can do it yourself. Although sometimes it's helpful to have somebody else to bounce things off of, be it a therapist or a trusted loved one or a friend or whatever. But it's often good to bounce things off. I'm a verbal processor. I process my thoughts and feelings verbally with people. So I either have close friends I can process with or a therapist if I need to.
Yeah, and it
But not
also gives
everybody
you
is that way, and not
it
everybody
gives
does.
you accountability, right? If you're
Yeah.
sharing with someone on your own, I find that it's okay on your own,
Mhm.
but when you share with someone,
Yeah.
it's more powerful.
Yeah.
So
Can I
so
men- can I
yeah, I want to
mention our
ask.
website?
Yes, you will. I just want to ask one
Oh,
clarification
okay.
about the affirmation. So you take one piece of paper, you draw a line in the center to divide the paper into two parts.
Yeah, vertically.
Yes, vertically. On the left side of the paper, you write down a negative
No,
statement
no,
or a
you write
thought.
the positive on the left side,
A positive is on the left side.
and then the right side is the
Let's say I'm not good enough,
yeah.
I'm not a good parent, or whatever thought that comes throughout the day. Sort of you keep this as a log as you
Yes,
go through this process.
right.
Right.
You write the affirmation, which is I am able or I am a authentic parent. Let's use that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wait for what negative thoughts come up about it
For that positive thought or for the negative thought.
that are counter to the positive thought.
Yeah. So let's say I have a thought that I'm not a good, I'm failing, I'm not a good parent.
So yeah,
Do I stay with that negative feeling
no, you
and
take that negative thought, a negative feeling, write that down, and
mm-hmm,
then see if you can change that one into a
mm-hmm,
positive.
mm-hmm,
And then you write that down, and then you again look at what reaction is negative to that one you've written, the new one. And you keep doing
mm-hmm.
that, taking negative thoughts, turning them into positive affirmations until you don't get any more negative reactions coming up.
Oh, I see. Okay, so if I wrote, "I'm not a good enough parent," I'm a failing parent, and I wrote the counter to that as "I'm a confident parent," but
Absolutely.
I'm not yet believing in that,
Well,
right?
see, that's what you have to do. You have to process out all the negative beliefs you have about that statement until you reach a point actually where you don't have any more negative. You find an affirmation that you can't come back with a negative thought about
Mm.
to write down. So then you've cleared it.
Okay, good, good. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
So, as we reach the end of our conversation, can you tell where the listener can find you online?
Yeah. I have a website, which is it's actually a website about authentic living. And so there's some stuff in there on authentic parenting. And it's the URL is www.weinholds, my last name, plural, WEINHOLDS.org.
Excellent. Any parting thoughts? Anything that you want to say to the listener? Any question that they can ask themselves in finding their true self and neglecting their false self for good?
Well, I think the first advice I would have, please do not try to be a perfect parent. Accept your mistakes with humility and an opportunity as an opportunity to learn how to correct those mistakes in the future. But don't judge yourself and beat yourself up or act in shameful ways towards yourself. That would be my best advice I can give is that be accepting of your own humanity and your own humanness. And then also remember that when you do get upset and you have a reaction that's greater than the situation that calls for, look back and see where that might have come from. What might have happened in your past that created that. And usually when you come back to those things in the past, ask yourself, what didn't get finished in that? Was there something I needed to say? Was there something I needed to hear? Was there something that somebody needed to do or something I needed to do that didn't happen? So look at what didn't get finished, and then you can finish it in present time.
By taking personal responsibility and not
Yeah.
blaming your parents or
Right,
anyone
right.
else.
Yeah, I tell my clients you have a choice. You can either blame your parents for what's going on in your life or grow up.
I think that's a very good note to end our conversation today. I very much enjoyed it. The time flew by very quickly. Thank you again for joining me today, and I wish you safety, health, and happiness.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for inviting me to come. It was a pleasure to talk with you about a topic that I'm very much excited about and interested in, and we'll be continuing to write books about that topic because I think it's one of the most important things. And what you're doing with your podcast is extremely important to help parents, give parents support, because every parent needs that. And whatever you can give your parent, the parents that listen to your podcast in terms of support from your guests or yourself, that's how parents is going to learn how to become authentic parents.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it. What's your biggest takeaway? Did you find this conversation useful? How you might apply what you gleaned from this episode into your life, into your parenting? I want to hear from you. You can send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. You can call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. And for you, my international listener, there is a free SpeakPipe tool on the contact page of my website, authenticparenting.com/contact. If you find the podcast helpful and enjoyed the content, I would appreciate if you could take a quick second to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts. Join your fellow listeners, start conversations, ask questions, participate in our monthly book club, in our giveaways, and so much more in our private Facebook community, the Authentic Parenting Community. Some of our guests are there too. Don't forget to check out the top 20 characteristics of an authentic parent that Dr. Weinhold provided. Until next week, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.